Hello guys, and welcome back to a brand new video from me, Pickles Park Reviews. Now, if you're wondering why I'm in some weird black and white filter, it's because today I'm going to be talking about the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Now, the Snyder Cut is something that I've kind of avoided talking about. To be honest, I haven't really done many DC videos in quite a while. I think the last one I did was a trailer reaction for the Batman. So I thought I'd actually finally cover the Snyder Cut of Justice League. I did do a video on it. None of you will have seen it though, because it was an unreleased video. I recorded it, probably about over a year ago now, and I never released it. Didn't make for enjoyable watch. Yeah, let's just say I wasn't exactly in favour of it. And now we're getting more and more information about the Snyder Cut. It's coming out pretty soon, I believe. And yeah, my opinion hasn't really changed on it. But before we get into that, let's just get out of this weird black and white filter. Now, I believe to get out of it, you just need to click your fingers. I really am a pathetic human being, aren't I? There we go. Now, let's actually talk about the Snyder Cut of Justice League. It just doesn't look very good. In my opinion, at least, it doesn't look very good. And I think I need to talk about why I'm just not a big fan of the idea of the Snyder Cut in general. Now, I agree with the basic terms of why some people want the Snyder Cut of Justice League, and that's to get justice for Zack Snyder, who unfortunately could not continue working on Justice League after his daughter tragically committed suicide, therefore not being able to work on the film he'd probably dreamed about making due to something that was completely out of his control. It's obviously a very sad story, and obviously my heart goes out to Zack Snyder and his family. Obviously that was not an easy thing to deal with, far from it. To obviously have someone taken from you like that is obviously heartbreaking, and then for that also to take this film away from him is also heartbreaking. Obviously they could have just postponed Justice League, but everyone knows these big blockbusters, apart from this year because of coronavirus, also you know these big blockbuster companies obviously have a set date of when they want to get the film out, and they're very unwilling to postpone it. So obviously they didn't postpone it so Zack Snyder could still finish the film. They ultimately just went, Zack Snyder can take some time off, he isn't involved in the film now, let's get someone else in and actually release it when we want to release it. And they got in Joss Whedon, who obviously made Avengers and Age of Ultron. And ultimately what Joss Whedon did is completely change the tone of the film. Obviously Zack Snyder's film would have been, you know, dark, gritty, very much like Batman v Superman, very much like Man of Steel, but more I suppose in line with the very dark and gritty tone of Batman v Superman, whereas Joss Whedon wanted to make it a bit more hopeful, a bit more colourful, a bit more in line with the tone of something like the Avengers, which was obviously very popular. Now you can obviously see that what I imagine happened is Warner Brothers didn't really want Zack Snyder, so they kind of just ushered him out the door because they wanted a new vision, and they obviously kind of, you know, took advantage of the fact that Zack Snyder had a very tragic, you know, thing happened to him, and obviously used the opportunity to shove him out the door and get someone new and who was going to spearhead a project that was more in line with what they would for the rest of the cinematic universe. There's obviously a load of different stuff behind it. I'm not going to negate the fact that it was a pretty bad move from Warner Brothers, a pretty distasteful move. I'm not going to negate all of the stuff that's come out since. I'm not an expert on it, I haven't really read up on it, but from what I have seen of people like Ray Fisher and what they've been talking about, there's some very shady stuff going on about the production of Justice League, and it wasn't a particularly lovely production to work on, it doesn't sound like. So a lot of people want to see Zack Snyder, you know, back in, taking the reins of the film that he tragically couldn't finish, and give his take on the film that was ultimately pretty botched in terms of behind the scenes. I can understand that, and in theory I'm on board with that, but ultimately you need to bring in some other factors here. You need to bring in the fact that I hate Batman v Superman. Hate is a strong word, I don't use that very, you know, lightly, but ultimately Batman v Superman may be my least favourite film of all time. I'll be honest, there's very little I really like about it, and I think the thing is it's just so bad, but also it's not even fun, because you get those films that are so bad that they're good, but Batman v Superman is just so bad that it's painful. I think a lot of it is down to Zack Snyder just unfortunately not really understanding the characters all too well, or at least maybe he understands it, but what he's doing with the characters he just doesn't really work for what we know. I'm mainly alluding to Batman killing, Superman killing, all that sorts of stuff. The characterization of several characters is just off. Lex Luthor is not a great villain, and ultimately it falls into the same pitfalls of something like Civil War, where ultimately, why do you need a villain there to get the two heroes to fight? It wants to have its cake and eat it. It wants to have the two heroes fighting each other, while also wanting to have an actual villain, so that doesn't work. And ultimately, in terms of the two pair fighting, ultimately it kind of loses its impact, where, you know, Superman is very clearly in the right and Batman is very clearly in the wrong. That kind of doesn't work, because ultimately it should be equal size here. That's the whole point of a film like this. But ultimately Batman v Superman doesn't do that by having Superman manipulated into fighting by Lex Luthor because they've got his mother hostage, but Batman openly wanting to fight him because he just hates Superman. That's really bad storytelling. But also, other than the story, which I just think is pretty pants and ultimately does not understand any of the characters at all and kind of botches all of it, ultimately one of my biggest problems with Batman v Superman is the tone of the film. It's just set in a world that is just so devoid of hope that ultimately it's really hard to enjoy the film. It takes some cues from the Dark Knight trilogy, but it just does not understand what made the Dark Knight trilogy work. Like, it was grounded, yes, but it was never, like, really devoid of hope, was it? It was grounded in the sense that everything felt that it was set in realism. It was dark because it dealt with some more real-world interpretations of certain foes, like the Joker being a more open terrorist, Two-Face ultimately, you know, actually having probably visual scarring. But ultimately, when you think about it, they're still quite comic booky, and they're not really dark. They're not set in a Gotham where it's just dark and it rains all the time, and ultimately there's no hope. In fact, hope is actually a core theme of those movies. Ultimately, The Dark Knight Rises, the majority of that film, actually takes place in the day, which I think is pretty bold. But what I'm saying is that these films aren't really dark, they're just more grounded. Yes, they're gritty, but they've also got hope, they've also got comic book elements. The main reason it tries to ground it in reality is just to get that realism factor. Ultimately, I think that Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder took that completely the wrong way, and in Batman v Superman you've got a world that's just so dark, devoid of hope, it just rains all the time, all the characters are gritty, there's no one really likeable, and it's just a world that's just so devoid of hope. As I've said, there's a scene where I'm pretty sure there's a character in a wheelchair who ultimately, you know, tries to climb onto the Superman statue, and he's really struggling, like, it looks like he's gonna fall, but he almost feels like, oh yeah, I'll die, I just want to do this anyway. It seems like wants to touch Superman, which would be a problem, because I just hate the Jesus metaphor in Man of Steel, particularly Batman v Superman. I can understand what he's going for, but it's just a bit too on the nose. But it seems like it's going in that direction, but no, it doesn't. He just does all that just to spray paint false God onto the statue, and then you see him being taken away and it being described as like a hate crime or something. And that aspect of it, that like gritty, like real world, devoid of hope aspect of it, I just don't find enjoyable. Every single frame is grey apart from the green of the kryptonite. Yeah, it's just, I just don't really enjoy it, and I think the tone is one of the biggest issues. I think for me, one of the reasons I enjoy the Justice League we got, and yeah, spoilers, I actually enjoyed the Justice League we got. Most people probably turn off the video here after knowing that I did that, and this video is coming from the position of someone who actually enjoyed the original Justice League. I did a couple of videos on this, my movie reaction back in 2017, please don't watch it, I beg of you. And then also an unpopular opinions video on Justice League I made in 2019, which I think is a pretty decent video, so if you want more of my exploration on my thoughts of me defending it, then go watch that video. It's a couple of years old, but I still agree with most of my points. Yeah, I like Justice League, and I think one of the reasons I enjoyed it is ultimately it's just quite enjoyable. It's not the best film in the world, the plot is a bit you know, Steppenwolf is a pretty crap villain, but ultimately I just think it has a lot of fun with bringing these characters together. You know, there's jokes in there, there's humours, the world is fairly colourful whilst also being quite dark as well. It gets a good mix of that, and ultimately it just kind of revels in just the amount of fun you can have with these characters. I'm not saying the film is a flat out comedy, it's actually, you know, fairly dark in places, and ultimately, you know, there are a lot of serious moments. I'm not saying it's like laugh out loud comedy. What I mean by so, I'm just saying it's an enjoyable film to watch. Like you watch The Avengers and you just think that's a pretty enjoyable film to watch. I just found it quite enjoyable, and I really enjoyed the film. I still quite enjoy Justice League. I just think that it's not the best film, but going from, you know, the shoddy, and I mean shoddy foundations that were Batman v Superman, to try and achieve all that it would achieve in an enjoyable film, I think ultimately it did a pretty good job. It's a serviceable Justice League movie. It's not the best Justice League movie in the world, but it's still a pretty good Justice League movie. So I quite enjoyed Justice League. I think it's fine. Now, discounting all the behind the scenes issues, I think it's fine. Is it the best movie? No. Does it even hold a candle to the original Avengers film? No, it doesn't. But ultimately, it's an enjoyable film that had a pretty good basis to set up better things to come from the DCEU. So what I mean by that is I think that ultimately, while Justice League, it was pretty enjoyable, it's not the best film in the world, it was a good place to set up more stuff to come after that, and it seemed like we were getting that with things like Aquaman, Shazam, Wonder Woman 1984, which I haven't actually seen. I am going to see it and review it soon, but I haven't actually seen that. But what I mean is, after that you could see a real progression of much more lighter and light-hearted, but just more fun and colourful films, you know, with a much brighter colour palette, with much more hope involved, that just enjoyed themselves a bit more as films, that ultimately, you know, wouldn't have occurred, you know, post-Batman v Superman but pre-Justice League. So ultimately, while Justice League was planned and ultimately it wasn't the success everyone wanted, it wasn't the amazing story, ultimately it had a good basis for, you know, the DCEU to expand on in the future, which is why I have such an issue of us going back to remake Justice League with Zack Snyder's vision. As I've said, I'm not a big fan of Zack Snyder's take on DC. I'm not a big fan of probably the tone he would have implemented into Justice League. I was a lot happier when that tone was completely scrapped and thrown in a gutter, to be quite honest with you, because I utterly despise that take. I just don't like it, and ultimately I respect Zack Snyder as a filmmaker. I respect all the tragedies that have happened to him. I respect that ultimately, you know, he should be able to make this film and he should be able to get his vision out there. But what I'm saying is I was glad that the mainline Justice League film that we got wasn't his vision. And I do have an issue with us going back to try and make this Justice League film, because ultimately, it kind of makes the original Justice League as kind of like the non-canon version, which is a bit of a shame for people like me who actually like the original Justice League. But also, I have an issue with us spending all the time going back, whereas I felt like the DCU was going in a quite interesting direction, and ultimately it feels like we're kind of, you know, not doing that now. We're kind of halting that direction just to go back. And yeah, I think even then though, if it was just like a one-off thing, I wouldn't mind it. I think the main problem though is the fact that ultimately there was only 30 minutes of footage that Zack Snyder actually shot. So that means they're spending a heck of a lot of money to essentially make an entirely new film. And that is quite frustrating, because they could have spent all that money actually making new films, you know, with new characters, maybe new stories. Yeah, Justice League wasn't what everyone wanted to do, but how about you actually try and do it justice by doing a very entertaining sequel, rather than just trying to remake the film we already got. The thing is what I have such an issue is it's less of an alternative cut and more of a remake, to the fact that they're literally pouring so much money into reshoots just to make this thing a 3-hour cut of a completely different film. And ultimately, I just don't really know why. Like, I do know why, because Snyder deserves to have his vision there. I understand why people are so passionate for him to get his vision out there, but ultimately, is it really worth spending all this money? I want Snyder to get his vision, but ultimately, if the footage wasn't filmed for him to get his vision out there, then ultimately they should have just said, you know, Zack, you know, I appreciate you want to get your vision out there and people want you to get your vision out there, but ultimately there just isn't enough footage to actually get your vision. You didn't film enough of it for us to fully create a film that is solely your vision. That's what should have happened, because they're spending so much money on a film that ultimately is a remake. They're not spending money on new films, and I think that is an issue. And also, it just really doesn't entertain me. The thing is as I said, Justice League has many faults, but one of the things I appreciated was the fact that it actually had a lot more colour in it, and the subsequent movies in the DCU really embrace that colour. But this version of Justice League seems like we're going back to those greys, those constant grey colour palettes, or things like Batman v Superman. Literally, why I made that joke about the black and white filter is it feels like every single bit of footage is in black and white or in grey. It feels just not what I like from these movies. and it feels like it's taking itself far too seriously, especially as it's going to be R-rated. Now, I don't think it necessarily shouldn't be R-rated, because at the end of the day, it's an alternative cut of a film that came out in 2017. Kids aren't really going to be entertained by the Zack Snyder Justice League, is what I would say if it was just an alternative cut. But seeing as this is going to be seemingly the new canon version, then you should make it a 12. Like, come on, kids want to see this. I have an issue with R-rated superhero films. You know, Deadpool is fine, Logan was fine, but ultimately I think when you've got characters like this with so much hope that kids love, kid icons, ultimately I don't think you should be restricting them from going to see it. That's just my issue anyway, because I know I would have been pretty pissed if I couldn't go see the new Justice League movie. I know it's not going to be in cinemas anyway, it's on HBO Max, but you know, regardless, you shouldn't restrict kids from that, at least in my opinion, because Batman and Wonder Woman and Superman and Flash are first and foremost kids' characters. I just think the tone of this just seems like we're going back to that Batman v Superman really dull and really devoid of hope tone, which is something I'm particularly not a big fan of, and I don't like how it's just being implemented into this film that that's a better alternative. The thing is that when Batman v Superman came out, everyone disliked it. Well, not everyone, obviously some people liked it, but most people disliked it. But it seems like now everyone loves Batman v Superman, and everyone's like, yeah, you know, we're really up for Justice League. But it feels like people kind of forgot what Batman v Superman was. I feel like people have almost romanticised Batman v Superman, and you're kind of forgetting that actually Zack Snyder's Justice League was probably not going to be very good. Yes, it's going to be more of Snyder's original vision and not a botched vision between Snyder and Whedon, but ultimately I just don't see, like, just because it's his original vision doesn't mean this Justice League film is going to be good. And going by his track record of BVS, I just don't see this film being good. I don't see it being worth the money, to be quite honest with you, of the amount of reshoots they're putting into it. Also, it does seem like Snyder's just chucking things at a wall and seeing what sticks. We've got Jared Leto coming back as the Joker. He's having a cameo. And you look at the pictures they're releasing him, and I go on record that I really dislike Jared Leto in Suicide Squad. The look, the performance, the characterization, it's awful. But this, it's better, but it's not great. And I think the reason is it just goes down that, you know, taking itself far too seriously angle that I've gone down before. We had Joker, and that was fine because it was a film that was supposed to be taking itself quite seriously. But ultimately this feels like it's really taking itself too seriously. Like, really taking itself too seriously. Even down to the black and white image. Like, just release the image in colour, man. Like, come on. I feel like it's just like creating the Joker as this weird Hannibal Lecter. You know, people said it gave them, you know, vibes of something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you can certainly see that. The longer hair as well, you know, the smudged makeup, it feels like it's taking itself far too seriously, and it also feels like it's just utterly ripping off Heath Ledger's Joker. But the thing is, you can't rip off Heath Ledger's Joker because he was so good. It's just going to feel like a pale imitation yet again. Like Jared Leto's Joker kind of already did it in parts. It's going to feel more like that. It doesn't feel like an original take. If you're going to bring back Jared Leto and give him a redesign, make him more of the classic Joker. I think that's what we all wanted to see after Heath Ledger's Joker. Ledger's Joker was great, but how about we have more of the classic Joker? Apparently not. Apparently, we're just going to get a Heath Ledger clone. I mean, some of the aspects I like, but he just looks like a pure murderer. And I know the Joker is a murderer, but what I mean is he doesn't look like he has any quirks about him, which at least the Heath Ledger Joker did, you know. I just don't think releasing it in black and white really does him any favours. I know it's because of quarantine, but the hair just reminds me of Heath Ledger's Joker. And where's Jared Leto even in this film? For a cameo for 3 minutes, and people are raving about this? Like, come on guys, I'm pretty sure one of the main problems with Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad is because he also only had 3 minutes screen time in that film, and everyone disliked this film for it. So why are we not happy with 3 minutes in this? Why don't you actually give Jared Leto a film where he's the main villain, for God's sake?
So yeah, I thought I'd just touch on the trailer that came out actually after this video was recorded. Yeah, I've been sitting on this one for a little while. But yeah, when talking about the Joker, I presume everyone will have wanted me to mention his small appearance in the latest Snyder Cut trailer, and it only really reinforces my point that A, he doesn't really need to be there, B, that they're kind of ripping off Heath Ledger's Joker, and see that, well, I just don't have any hope for the characterization, and I don't have any hope for the characterization of this entire film, to be quite honest with you. It still looks like it's taking roots from its over-serious edgelord cousin Batman v Superman. It doesn't feel like it has changed or improved in any way, which is my biggest point of this Justice League film, is that I felt like Warner Brothers had realised that Batman v Superman wasn't very good and were going in other directions, but now they're just going back to this, going back to these very clear faults, and that's just a shame because it doesn't bode well for the rest of the DC cinematic universe or whatever the hell is going to be going on with DC movies in the future. It doesn't bode well. But yeah, talking about Jared Leto's Joker, yeah, everyone, the big talking point for everyone was the fact that he literally says we live in a society, and that's just ridiculous. Like, how can you unironically make your villain say a meme? Like, seriously, I don't understand it. Like, why would you do it? It's just laughable, and Suicide Squad was cringe in terms of the Joker, but this is just as cringe, because unironically making him say we live in a society, it's just ridiculous. Why would you do that? It just reinforces that point of, oh, this feels like, you know, your edgelord's Justice League, this ain't your kiddie's Justice League, and it does feel like that. It's taking itself far too serious, and it's trying to be edgy for edgy's sake. Yeah, it just doesn't work, and it ended off being kind of laughable. And also, as I mentioned in this video, it seems like that could be his literal only scene, so why are people getting excited for a literal cameo when everyone hated the cameo in Suicide Squad because it was only a cameo? So why are people getting excited about this? It's just like, why? It just shows what a couple of years can do to make people forget about all their issues about the other films. People have forgotten about their issues with Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad now, which is like, yeah, it's just the world we live in. Also, the trailer itself didn't really get me excited at all, to be quite honest with you. It's just like, the thing is in this video, I mentioned that it feels like they're flat out remaking Justice League rather than kind of giving an alternative cut. But this trailer, half of it feels like new, like a completely new film, and the other just literally feels like the exact same film we got before, which means that the film's probably going to be very bloated, very jarring, and ultimately all the new stuff, rather than really reshaping the film, which I thought it was going to be originally, it's just going to be the same Justice League we got, but probably about an hour more of just alternative subplots. That seems what we're going to get. Yeah, this trailer did nothing for me, and it only really reinforces the points I made in this video. And even after recording that, even more news has come out about Jared Leto's Joker. A new picture has come out, yet again, a black and white image with him wearing a crown of thorns. I'm fed up of the religious imagery in these Snyder movies, man. Yeah, it's just really bizarre. I don't know what they're even trying to do with the Joker in his predictably limited screen time in this film. It seems like they're going for so many different interpretations. I just don't know. It looks like a mess on Jared Leto's Joker in terms of where he's concerned. Just, yeah, it's not coherent at all, and yeah, he wasn't great in Suicide Squad, but it feels like they have no idea what new direction to take him in, and they're just throwing a load of darts at a board, and then just, you know, choosing which ones. It's really ridiculous. And this religious imagery, it just looks really stupid on Jared Leto's Joker. So yeah, again, it only reinforces my point.
This project, this Justice League remake, the Snyder Cut, I just can't get over the fact that it's just not really working. I just don't like the tone of the thing, and I think it's just a waste of money and a waste of creativity to go back to this film when you could be making new films. Shoving in cameos from things like the Jared Leto's Joker and just making him some generic Heath Ledger knockoff, I just don't think is great. You could have done such a good redesign of Jared Leto's Joker. It just feels like old people didn't like the gangster vibes, let's just make him Heath Ledger's Joker. Like, come on guys, there's other Jokers. You've also got Steppenwolf, which he's redesigned, and yeah, it just feels like, here's the original Steppenwolf. Just add some more spice. I don't even know if it's an upgrade, it looks kind of like a downgrade. This whole film just feels like, oh yeah, this ain't your kiddies Justice League, this ain't your kids Justice League, this is the Justice League for for, you know, us adults, you know, this is the adult film. And the problem is by doing that, you're just sucking the life out of these beloved characters. That was my problem with BVS, and unfortunately, I felt like that aspect, if anything, was the main thing of what I liked about Justice League, was that was kind of rectified. It doesn't feel like we're getting that. Ultimately, I can appreciate why people want Zack Snyder to make this movie. I can appreciate why he's making this movie, but ultimately, there's too many logistics involved that just make me really not care about this entire project. You know, Snyder's vision, you know, as much as I have respect for Snyder, is a pants vision, and I really don't think his vision fits DC at all, to be quite honest with you. The damage this could do to future movies, I just think in terms of tone-wise, it could really set us back into 2016, and I really don't want that. I thought we'd, you know, learn from that. Ultimately, all this money being spent on remaking a film, ultimately you could have spent all that money on making new projects, because ultimately there was only 30 minutes of footage, so this is mostly going to be new stuff, a completely new story, which, you know, you could have spent that money on other projects, and a lot of it does just feel like throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. You know, we've got Darkseid in it now, we've got the Joker in it now, Lex Luthor's probably in it, you know, why don't you throw Green Lantern in it? Oh wait, he probably is, judging by that scene in the Justice League trailer, you remember the one. Let's just throw everything in there. It feels what that is. I know it's a 3-hour film, but come on, Dark Knight Rises was like a 3-hour film, they didn't chuck the kitchen sink in. I just can't see this being a good project, and yeah, I appreciate people may be excited for this, but ultimately it's all the red flags. You know, I wish Snyder were the best, but I'll be honest, it doesn't look particularly good, and I'm not really excited for it. Yes, thank you for watching. If you enjoy this video, leave a like, drop a sub and hit that notification bell to stay notified for all my latest videos. I hope you enjoyed this video. I imagine I may get a bit of hate on this if anyone manages to see this. If this actually gets picked up in the algorithm, I may get hate for this, who knows. But yeah, I hope I explained myself too well. As I said, I've got no problem with people enjoying this, or even Zack Snyder himself. I have no issue with people looking forward to it. I just thought I'd give my perspective of why I don't think it looks particularly good, and why I'm a bit worried for it, and why ultimately I just don't really have any interest in the project. But yes, regardless, you know, what did you think? Did you like it? Do you not? Do you like the Justice League original? Do you not? Are you looking forward to the Snyder Cut? Are you not? What are your thoughts on Jared Leto's redesign? Whatever, drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd be really interested in reading them. But yes, thank you guys for watching, and of course, a goodbye.